Okay, hi folks. So if you're joining this tutorial, you've either done the last one or you're going to use your prefabs that you've used before. So the way this level is currently set up is there is a tile map which is set as ground. There are two characters which are able to be controlled through the keyboard and they're able to jump around. I have a user interface on here which I'm going to move to the very back, and I now have an asteroid. The asteroid has the modify health, -1, and each of the players has the health system set up on them. We want to be really careful. I honestly often just turn off the interface so that it's not in my way when I'm working, and whenever I press play, the interface will pop back up and I'll be able to see it. Okay, so this tutorial is going to tell us how to have two characters with health, and this can also be applied to a boss mob, perhaps, and a player. So you could track the boss's health on here as well if you wanted to. It might get a little tricky in that sense because you'd have to name the boss as the player. But each one of these is tagged. This one's tagged as player, and this one is tagged as player 2. And so when I select the user interface and I say number of players and I change it to 2 players, and then from score I change it to life, it will now show the life of both players on the screen. So right now they each have 3 life. One way, if you're just setting this up, one way to quickly test that without doing anything else requiring the asteroid would be to go into the blue player and give it a different health than the purple player. And because the health often defaults to 3, I often use different numbers. And so when I press play, seeing that this one is 4 and this one is 5, I automatically know that it's pulling the correct information for that life. Now, you could do that separately without the asteroid, and then if you add the asteroid which has modify health on it, you could now run into it with each player and make sure that it's working. There we go. And now that was interesting. The purple player pushed the rock, and because the purple player pushed the rock, he only, or she only, they only took 1 damage. And when they pushed it into the blue character, which only had 1 health, the blue character was the one who was destroyed. Okay, so there was a few other questions that were really exciting questions that prompted me to figure out a few more things for you. So I am going, on the tile map level, I am going to add a little bit more here. Let's try adding something here and here and then here. The idea being, like, if they can jump that high, which we need to check, maybe it's a race to get to the top. They can't jump that high. So I'm going to need to adjust how high they can jump, or I can adjust the gravity. And so for the blue pair, let's give it 35. And for the purple player, let's give it 35. That might be higher than I needed to, but it works. Let's check the purple player. Yeah, that's looking like it works. But here's the problem. You can't tell who's winning because it's off the screen. So I'm going to press play. Let's move this. So what we could do is we could move the camera, right? Because we're not really using all of our real estate. And so if I was to move the camera, it would now work, and I could see, oh, and I can get there in 1 jump, right? So I could see who's essentially doing that win. Let's turn down the jumping because that is really a high jump. Let's make it 20. That should be enough. Purple player 20. That should be enough. But what if you wanted to have the camera follow the player? Well, if you wanted the camera to follow the player, there we go. We know this step in that we select the main camera and we say add camera follow script, and then we drag the thing we want to follow, which in this case is actually the blue player in the scene, and we drag that to object to follow target, and then we play. So the camera is now following this character. And so if the purple player gets pushed off the screen, they just can't see what they're doing. That seems like it's terribly unfair. So we should definitely fix that. So in order to do this, I'm going to show you how to make 2 different cameras, one for each player. Now, the most complicated part of this is the fact that we actually have to turn playground off in order to see this. So if you take a look at this, this is what your playground looks like, or your camera looks like in playground. If I go up here to playground and I say turn playground off, it's going to take a minute. I don't think I need to click off. I'm just going to be patient. Some of the students in the lab found it that they got a sort of spinning wheel for a really, really, really long time, but pretty much everyone's computer was able to do this. There we go. I got the little spinny wheel for a second. And now a few other options are showing up. We're also seeing a camera preview, which we weren't seeing before. And we've got all this data. So to make this work, we're going to right click in our hierarchy and we're going to create a new camera. And I'm going to rename these. So I'm going to call this blue camera. And I'm going to call this purple camera. Now, you can see that one camera has a giant X and the other camera has a box. This is because the camera that we had originally, because this is a 2-dimensional game, was what's called orthographic. The camera we just created is perspective. Perspective is the default, and we need to change that to orthographic. Now what we're seeing is that the size of the cameras don't match. Our first camera is 10 and our second camera is 5. So we need to change that so that they match. It doesn't matter if they line up, but if I hit this arrow for move, or if I hit the W key, it's basically showing me the center is where my gizmo is. So I'm going to line that up on the purple character's smile. I'll line this one up on the blue person's smile. And when I press play, I'm going to see nothing is different. I still just have my blue character, and the camera should be following my blue character, which it's actually not doing right now. That's interesting. I might need to look into that and fix that in just a second. Okay. But what's happening is I might have 2 cameras, but there's one camera that is essentially on top of the other camera, and it's blocking my view of the camera below it. So what I need to do is this thing called viewport rectangle. That's how much of the screen the camera is taking up. And so I'm going to say, I want you to be half the size that you were. And now if I press play, that's not actually working the way that it usually does. I'm going to look at my console. I do have an error which has to do with my audio listeners. So I'm going to change the purple camera audio listener to be off. This is a little strange. Oh, maybe it's because I haven't tagged it as main camera. Nope, that's not doing it. This is working differently than it did in the classroom. Let's see if we can figure this out. Okay. The point is, on the second camera, you also need to make it 1/2. And you can see right here in that preview, that should be focused right on that character. And what I'm going to, oh, I know what was happening. This purple camera was on top of the blue camera. That's what's happening. Okay. It's because this depth is 0 and this depth is -1. Okay. That actually makes sense. It would be better if this depth was -2. And once I have them both being half the screen, now when I press play, you can see that I'm only getting half the screen. So what we need to do is move the other one halfway over. There we go. So I'm making the X 0.5 and the width 0.5. So our settings are blue camera 0, 0, 0.5, 1, purple camera 0.5, 0, 0.5, 1. So when I press play, I'm now seeing two different screens. The blue camera is following the blue person. The purple one is not yet following the purple person. So we're going to resolve that. So we're going to add our follow to our camera, but that button is gone because that button is actually part of Playground. So we're going to try and go and turn Playground back on, which will also hide all of these complicated other things that we don't need to worry about now that we've done this setup. This should take another minute. I'll get a little spinny wheel eventually, and then the data for the camera will change. Well, the data for the camera doesn't actually change, it just becomes hidden. Did I say turn off? I meant to say turn on. There we go. There, it was thinking, and it should have hidden, but it didn't hide all of that data. But now when I click off, it's showing up as hidden. Let's come back to this one. It's showing up as hidden, and I have that add camera follow script back. So I'm going to add camera follow script for the purple, dragging and dropping it into what it's going to be tracking. And now I have a game where it might be a race to get up to a higher platform. There. So this was a tutorial that was requested by someone who was thinking about doing a space game. And so the idea might be that if these were spaceships, they could fly on an infinite course vertically or a longer course vertically. Depending on how you wanted to make your level, you could use your tile map here, and you could actually, let's do it this way. You could actually make it a course that the two of them have to share, or if it wasn't going to be a sort of PvE, you could actually make it something that is blocked off and that they're trying to run as quickly as they can up an obstacle course. So that might look something like this. Now what's really interesting is that I can jump whenever I hit ground, but if these side pieces are marked as ground, I can run into it sideways and get stuck and then jump. So if that's something that is not something you want the game to be able to do, you might have to differentiate between ground being things that you're landing on as a horizontal surface, being ground things that are vertical. Okay, let's see. I think that is everything that I wanted to cover for setting up the two cameras and for setting up the player health. So I'm going to stop here and break this into another tutorial for the next couple of steps so that each tutorial isn't too long.